So people say it's not autism, just really severe ADHD. A lot. So today we're going to unpack the difference between the two, and hopefully you'll come out of it realizing that a lot of what people call uncommon traits of ADHD are actually just autistic traits. And there is a reason why this is. If you're new here, hello and welcome. My name is Sydney and I make videos about being disabled, autistic, a lesbian, who wears vintage clothes, and writes songs. So if any of those things bring you joy or interest you, feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you. But anyway, back to the thing. So, ADHD versus autism, which sounds like some sort of battle, which that's not quite what I was going for, but it's not really versus anything. It's more of like a Venn diagram, because 20 to 50% of ADHDers are also autistic, and then 30 to 80% of autistics have ADHD. So there is a lot of overlap, and a lot of the traits can look exactly the same. The key difference here is the reasoning behind these traits. So let's look at a few examples. First one is sensory issues. So let's say that there's an itchy tag on your shirt. For an autistic person, there's a sensory issue with the tag because the tag is causing physical pain. For an ADHDer, there's a sensory issue with the tag because it's distracting. And for an autistic ADHDer, like me, there's a sensory issue with the tag because it is causing physical pain and is therefore distracting. Also, sensory processing disorder is not inherent to ADHD, but is inherent to autism. So if you've been diagnosed with ADHD and sensory processing disorder, you might want to revisit that one. Social issues also follow the same general pattern. For an Audi, social issues are caused by a lack of understanding and an inability to pick up on social cues. For an ADHD person, social issues are caused by an inability to pay attention. For an autistic ADHDer, social issues are caused by the inability to pay attention to the things we understand, but also a lot of it we don't understand, so what's the point? But I might add, as we talked about in my empathy video a few weeks ago, that these social issues aren't inherent issues within a group of neurodivergent people. But that's a separate conversation. You can watch that video over here. In regards to stimming versus fidgeting, stims traditionally are an autistic trait, and they're typical for emotional regulation, while fidgets, an autistic and or ADHD trait, are to help aid with focus, to keep the body busy so you can focus. Special interests, again, are an autistic thing, but they have an ADHD semi-equivalent of the hyperfixation. The key difference here is that hyperfixations tend to be significantly more short-term and often mean a hyper-focus on a task or a project at hand rather than an entire topic for a long period of time. So even if these two things may look the same, there are fundamental differences in the root causes behind these traits. Definitionally, ADHD is defined as issues with executive functioning, which categorizes motivation, organization, activity levels, impulsivity, attention, emotional regulation, and decision making. Autism is defined as altered world processing, so that includes sensory issues, social interaction issues, and insistence on sameness and routines, stimming, delayed or altered fine and gross motor skills, executive dysfunction, difficulty with emotional regulation, etc. But there's a lot of overlap, and it's really difficult to know from the outside perspective whether somebody is autistic or ADHD or both. Not that it really matters. What matters is your own self-reflection and self-understanding. Because, as I've mentioned countless times before, the medical and diagnostic system in the US and in the world altogether is a hot mess. And if having a label helps you to find the tools that you need to be a better version of you, you're welcome to it. But back to the idea of, it's not autism, just severe ADHD. First of all, the majority of traits that people say either before or after uttering this statement are just autistic traits. And typically, in my experience, it's not that people are saying this because they don't want to admit or accept that they're autistic. It's more that they believe that it's incredibly rare to have both ADHD and autism, and it's therefore impossible that they could be both. And then they have a whole nother existential crisis trying to choose between which label they think fits them best, and it's just a whole time. So let me reiterate this for you. 20 to 50% of ADHDers are also autistic, and 30 to 80% of autistics have ADHD. You can be both. I am both. I have not met an autistic person without ADHD, and about half, if not more than half, of the ADHD people that I know are also autistic. So you can be both. And it's also important to mention that these statistics are likely super skewed because of the underdiagnosis of autism and the overdiagnosis of ADHD. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The thing where professionals diagnose everybody with ADHD who has autism because of the stigma that autism has, and they're hoping that the person will be able to get the same resources and accommodations and live their lives stigma-free, therefore resulting in a lot of autistic people being misdiagnosed and the ADHD numbers to rise, which made the world decide to be terrified of autism and not take ADHD seriously at all. Cute, right? I mean, I might add that you weren't allowed to have a dual diagnosis of both ADHD and autism until 2013, and doctors overwhelmingly chose ADHD because of the stigma thing, which just created more stigmas. But anyway, that's why you'll find a lot of people with ADHD and sensory processing disorder or other comorbid diagnoses that fall under the autism umbrella rather than autism. Now, the first time I did testing, I was told I had a lot of the traits of autism, but not quite. And so he just gave me an ADHD diagnosis, told me that my accommodations would be the same, and sent me on my merry way, which was super annoying and very not cool. Because sure, accommodations might be the same, but as we talked about earlier, the root causes behind why we show these traits are very different. So if you're completely focused on the wrong cause, you'll just have an even more confused human. So, moral of the story, doctors think ADHD is somehow preferable, so they typically diagnose that instead of autism, and therefore a lot of ADHD people are actually just autistic, or they're both autistic and ADHD, like me. Either way, nobody can really truly know except for you. So if labels really matter to you and you feel the need to pick one, feel free to do some more research, pull up the DSM, it's a free PDF online, and analyze each trait you have within the context of each condition and see how the profile fits you. You could also do what I do and just slowly collect various diagnoses until you have to keep a note on your phone listing them all because you continuously forget. Or maybe I just have memory loss. Either way, whatever gets you the support that you need and gets you feeling the most like you is the right solution. I know this video was probably a little more vague than you expected it to be, and I'm sure you wanted more of a concrete answer of how to know which one is which, but there really isn't one here, unfortunately. But I hope that this can help to clear things up a little bit more for you if you're wondering if you're autistic. I have a lovely page on my website just for you, which is linked down below, and I also have a page for parents, friends, partners, etc. of autistic people and how you can support us, which is linked below as well. Anyway, that is all the things. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and remember, your story isn't over, it is only just begun. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.